So today we're going to talk a little bit about marketing. And I particularly today wanted to touch base and talk to you guys about, first of all, the differences between B2B and B2C marketing. For those of you that I don't know, Craig Oldham, I run a consulting firm called Madlow Executive Advisors. The name of the firm is my last name backwards, so we don't do creative work, as you can tell. But I've been doing this for about 8 years. We are a firm. We have 15 advisors, all former CMOs or CEOs, and many CEOs in the past that have actually exited their business. So we provide revenue growth strategies for companies that are typically in Series B or C, all the way up to about $250 million in revenue. And we help them tackle their tough challenges when it comes to revenue growth. Prior to starting a company about 8 years ago, I was Chief Marketing Officer for a small mid-sized telecom company in Baltimore, founder-led. Prior to that, Allstate, Zurich Insurance, AT&T. So think, big companies, a lot of process, that type of thing. So I really enjoy what I'm doing now. It really gives me a chance to dig in and do marketing. So I thought, when I had the chance to talk about what I do, I'm always happy to do that. So it's a free-flowing session. So anytime you guys want to chime in, ask a question, raise your hand, hit a button, doesn't matter to me. But first thing, what I would like to do is just touch on the differences between B2C and B2B marketing. And a lot of folks don't really know the difference. And I talk to a lot of people that get advice. I was just talking to a founder earlier today that they were like, here's the way we're doing marketing. We really need help in our social media. And they were doing B2B, right? It's project-based. They work with construction companies around program management. And so you really have to deconstruct the differences because you have to know who you're kind of getting advice from and the differences between B2C and B2B. And if you guys are in the B2B business, what I think most of us are, as I kind of look around the room, it's really about B2B, as we know, is really about focusing and building long-term relationships, while B2C is really about that immediate transaction, right? So we really talk about things that are a little bit different in B2B than we do B2C. Now, the tactical components of that can be social, can be email, can be all the different pieces that you often see in B2C, but it's a little different on that side. And we're going to talk about those differences too. The other thing that's also different about B2B is you often have multiple stakeholders that are involved, where B2C is typically decision makers are usually made by individuals, right? And so I want to buy a sweater, here it is, plop down my $100 and I get it. I typically don't have to ask anybody about buying that sweater. Unless you live in my household, then there's a committee that's involved in buying anything over $100, right? Just a joke. I can spend $100 most days. So that's really the key differences, right? So let's dig into how you begin to execute on some of those differences. Number one thing that we all need to do, like when you start to do B2B marketing, is identify your target. And I know this sounds very basic, but we're going to dig into this and go a little deeper into this. So ideal customer profile, that's kind of what we talked about in, it's a little marketing and sales talk on that, right? But you want to know exactly who your buyer is and understand your buyer. And you are going to have multiple buyer profiles inside of a B2B buyer piece of this, right? So maybe you're looking for vice presidents of procurement. You're looking for CEOs. You're looking for C-suite. You're looking for directors of marketing. You're looking for directors in construction, whatever the case might be, really understanding and digging into who buys your products. Now you can find this or your services. You can find this a number of different ways, right? So you can go through, do your data analysis, figure out who you want to build campaigns against. But that's the most important piece. Really dig in and really understand that ideal customer profile. The next thing that you want to do inside of that, and this is super important, is to find those moments of truth inside of that buying cycle. B2B buying cycles tend to be long, and they can be very long. They can actually outstrip your budgeting cycle, right? So it gets very complicated in that side. So what you want to do is you want to look for those moments of truth and what causes a person to buy, right? So I can tell you, and I'm going to flip to a B2C example because sometimes those are a little easier to understand and they're much more universal. When I worked at Allstate, I did marketing campaigns, and we know in the insurance industry, there's really only 3 triggers that cause people to go and buy insurance. I could give you a coupon today and say, I'll give you 30% off your car insurance if you'll go and shop for insurance today. None of you would take me up on that offer because it's just so painful. It's like going to the dentist. So the only thing that causes that moment of truth in that particular industry is, number one, you buy a new car, you move to a new state, you have a second child. That's it, right? Those are the things. So what we do is we market around those events to say, okay, now I'm ready to purchase a product or a service that you have. That's the moment of truth. You really need to dig in and really begin to understand those. In a B2B cycle, a lot of times what you want to do, this is a good time for marketing and sales to kind of come together and understand what those moments are, because sometimes they're not all that intuitive, right? So let me stop there for a minute, see if you guys have any questions. ICP, moments of truth. Has everybody? Yeah.
So when you talk about, these are the things, quote unquote, everybody knows, but it's, yes, you want to identify your ideal customer and so forth. And what are the different characteristics? We talk about, psychographic versus demographic.
Yeah.
What do you think is most important?
So psychographic helps you with the understanding, right? The psychographic will help you with those moments of truth. What you want is the demographic components of that. So the demographic components will help you target. And there is a difference between segmentation and targeting. Segmentation are those psychographic components of this, right? I have a person, they look like this. This is how they think. This is how they feel. This is what motivates them to buy. Then you've got the targeting piece of that, which actually allows you to execute on it. So when you're targeting, you say, okay, I want somebody that works at a company of this size with this title, with this amount of revenue, right? That maybe has just made a job change, that has just hired somebody, has a job opening for this. All those different kind of targeting mechanisms. Think about doing a search on Sales Navigator, right? All of those elements inside of Sales Navigator can be targeting elements for you to utilize to go out and reach out to those folks.
Okay.
Now, once you build that piece, right? Now you got to figure out what you're going to say to them. That's where your moments of truth come in. So in your moments of truth, in your messaging components of that, what you want to do is figure out what are your hopes, dreams, fears, and pain points. Fears and pain points are really good things to know about your buyer, because those are the things you want to emphasize that you are able to solve for, right? That's what's going to make you different. So if you go out and you have somebody that says, listen, I've got a pain point in this, and I've got fear and doubt when it comes to strategic planning or my revenue for next year. Focus on that. You put your thumb on that pain point and talk about how you're going to solve that, right?
What if they don't know what their pain point is? Which is common.
It's very common. Yeah. So this is a very good point, Mark. This leads into the next part of this, right? So once you establish that, you find out what typically the pain points are. Now you want to develop content around those pain points, because as Mark is saying, a lot of times folks don't know where their pain points are. So what you want to do is begin to uncover those things. This is where your content development comes in. This is where your thought leadership comes in, because you really understand them and you understand the risks, and you're here to help them solve that pain and mitigate those risks. That's exactly what you want to do, right? So these can manifest themselves in a number of different ways. We often work with clients that their big target is RFPs, and they want to build RFPs, right? That's what they want, incoming RFPs. One a great tactic to do is build an RFP, right? A template for it. Fill it out for your industry based on what an RFP should look like. Put it up on your website, ask for their name and email, and they get a free template. What do you get out of it? You got a name and an email and somebody that's getting ready to do an RFP, right? So you're helping solve some of the pain issues. If you're trying to reach a procurement person that's looking to do an RFP, their pain is, I got to write an RFP for an industry I probably don't know anything about, or an item that maybe I don't know anything about. Solve that pain for them, right? Does that make sense?
Well, wouldn't it be so if you are as a marketer may not know anything about their industry either? Is that right?
Yes. Well, if you're marketing for a company and you don't know the industry, then you might have a problem to think through.
Okay.
But yeah, and I will tell you that's probably a whole nother session. But there are a lot of marketers that don't understand the business that they're trying to market, especially in B2B, right? That's a overall marketing organizational design problem that you have. So you may not have the right people in place if they don't understand how to market what that is. Now, if they don't and they're new, that's when you need to partner with the salespeople. Partnering with sales is not a bad thing. A lot of marketers feel like that's the case, but it's really not. This is really where sales can provide a lot of insight around those pain points.
Hopefully, salespeople know their industry really well because they're selling the product.
Well, you have to hope so. If marketing and sales don't know your industry, then yeah, you got a real problem. So you may want to steer clear of those, those folks.
Okay.
All right. So you notice we haven't talked about social media and email or anything yet, right? So what we've talked about is identifying your segment, understanding their pain points, and then creating content around those moments of truth and those pain points, right? So now we've got a collection of all of these pieces, right, that we want to deliver on. So the next piece that we want to build out is how do we distribute this content, right? How do we get the word out? The key thing that you want to do is create a value-added moment, right? Not a sales moment. We're not talking about sales. We're trying to build relationships with people, right? So the last thing you want to do, and we've all experienced this on the negative side, somebody calls you up and says, hey, would you like to buy something? Would you like to buy something? You want to buy this, you want to buy that. And they just keep bugging you about buying something. They haven't really proven to you, number one, that they're willing to have a conversation with you. So the thing that you have to do in this particular space is this is why you build the thought leadership piece. This is why you create those moments. So moments and value-added interactions can come in a number of different ways, right? So they can be, hey, I just wrote a white paper on the top 10 reasons why you should do X for 2025 planning, right? Would you like to take a look at it? I would love to give it away to you for free. I'm going to be at this conference. Would you like to attend? I'm putting on a webinar. Would you like to come? Those types of things, right? I have some great insights that I'd like to share in your industry. Do you mind if we have that? Could we have a quick 15-minute conversation around that? Right? So you want to create these value interaction moments. Now you're ready to distribute those moments out. And those can happen in a number of different ways. LinkedIn is great for B2B. You may want to steer clear, depending on your industry, around Facebook and Instagram. Those are really more consumer-based. We used to use them in B2B a little while ago, but to be honest with you, people are kind of steering away from them. And email is a great way to distribute this. But what you want to do is what you're distributing is the content and thought leadership components, right? The biggest mistake that a lot of B2B companies make when they're doing their outreach is they're saying this piece of content goes with email. This piece of content goes with social media. It's not true. You send out the same piece of content across multiple different tactics to get to that person because everybody has their preferred way that they would like to read and absorb content, right? So if you're doing a social media post on LinkedIn and saying, hey, I've got this top 10 checklist that you've really got to check out for this particular industry, and you've boosted it and you've sent it out, yes, put a video in front of it, right, to get more attention. But the core piece of that content should be in the post and then on your website. Because ultimately you want to get them back to your website so that you can collect intelligence around them, right? Don't put your content in just in an email and it's not in your website, because that's really what happens. Email, it all just gets deleted. All right, I'll stop there for a moment. That was a lot. I went kind of deep on that there for a minute.
So,
Any
so
questions?
another question may be, and I don't want to hog the microphone here, but when you've got a number of people, it's one thing for you as an individual to understand, oh, yes, I've got to do all this stuff. What if you have a team of people that some are focused on, shoe leather, some are focused on social media, some are focused on research? How do you integrate that? Or how do you pull information from lots of different sources?
Meaning like creating that content, Mark?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is really where, when you start to think about organizing your marketing team together, you really need to think about how it's organized, right? And it's one thing where when we talk to CMOs about functionally organizing versus vertically organizing, meaning functionally means I have somebody that does email, I have somebody that does social media. So when you have that type of an organization, what are you going to get? You're going to get people that are going to optimize email and social media. That doesn't make sense based on what I just said, right? So if you want to organize, you should organize around targets and segments. Then you're going to optimize around those items. You organize for what you want to optimize to, right? It doesn't take a lot of specialty. And even if you're trying to create, let's say you want to do the best email program in the world, nobody knows how to do email. Go find a contractor to do it. There's nothing wrong with that. There's a lot of people that know how to do email and optimize it. Same thing for social media, communities, those types of things.
Okay.
Tracy, I see a question brewing.
Oh, yes, thank you. My thought was here because I've, also been in marketing for millions of years. And so it's always been the question about, should you be a specialist? Should you be a generalist? What should you have in your quiver of arrows in your team? And so if I hear you correctly, are you saying then that you should have vertically oriented specialists and then augment those people with outsourced, if you need to, people who have the technical skills to do the job? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, if you're on a budget like that and you're trying to build a marketing team, always tell all of our clients, never outsource your strategy. Always outsource the tactical if you have to, right? So I would much rather build a team that strategically understands the business to counteract what Mark was saying, because that's what counteracts this idea that we have 50 people in marketing that don't know how the business works. Well, that's because they know how email works and they know how social media works. We want people that know how the business works. So hire them, train them, help them understand those, have them be leaders in a particular segment or target, then they'll understand your business better. You don't need somebody that's an email specialist to really understand the strategy of the business to be able to execute email effectively.
Thank you.
Yeah. Do you agree with that, by the way? I know you've been in marketing. We've had a conversation around that. What do you think?
Oh, I do agree with you on that. It's just in some organizations, you have the opportunity to have people who are very siloed and very specialist in a particular area.
Yeah.
And I tend to agree with you, exactly what you just said, but I wanted an expert advice.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Hey, Craig, what I found is part of the issue is people do marketing, they do webinars like this, they have this, they spend a lot of time setting it up, emailing invitations, or people do their, set up for a seminar or some sort of thing. And where it falls down is in the follow-up.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice around that, or is that a true statement? Maybe it's just me. Maybe I don't follow up well enough, but people get busy and there's so much effort that goes into doing marketing and mostly in-person sort of things. So what would your advice be around the follow-up piece of it, how to track and how to convert people to clients?
You guys are great. It's a great straight man, John. So that's the next piece of this, right? Operationally putting the engine in place. So when you build all of these pieces out, I'll talk about the mistake, right? And this is, I'm sure if you guys are all in sales and marketing, or you've touched in the C-suite at all, you know the argument between marketing and sales. Marketing just throws over leads, and then sales never follows up with them, and then it's just this battle back and forth. So what you have to do is you've got to make your marketing process, especially for those most critical elements like follow-up, have them be automated as much as you can, right? So somebody comes to a webinar, you've got 25 people at a webinar, plops into your CRM. Now I've got an automated process in the follow-up. The reason that I'm doing that is, and what I'm searching for analytically is I'm searching for moments, or excuse me, I'm searching for signals. Signals for when that moment of truth is about to happen. That's what you're looking for, right? As we said before, B2B sales cycles are long. They can outstrip your budgeting process. I might have 50,000 people in my CRM and my database. Inside of that 50,000, just because 25% of them are not responding back and engaging doesn't necessarily mean they're not good. It just means they're not in the buying cycle right now. So as you begin to build these things out, you're doing webinars, you're attending events, you're doing these particular things. You want to get all of those analytical elements into your CRM and measure them, and then ultimately score them to look for those signals, right? Just because somebody opens up an email doesn't necessarily mean they're ready to buy. It does mean that potentially they're engaged. So what we're looking for is this moment, this moment, this moment. So now you do one particular thing. Now I'm going to say, oh, well, are you interested in doing this particular thing? Are you interested in doing this, right? They open an email, they attend a webinar. Now they've asked for a demo. That seems like that might be something that's pretty interesting to follow up on, right? So as you begin to do this and you begin to automate it, that's how you begin to solve this, right? So marketing has to do a better job in most organizations about doing that initial follow-up components to any of these moments that are being created, either through marketing or sales, right? So just because a moment or one of these value-added moments happened in sales doesn't necessarily mean it's only theirs. It can be followed up with marketing as well. You just have to mechanically set up those systems. And honestly, it's not even that hard. Like 5 years ago, it was much harder than it is today with our modern CRMs and marketing automation tools. This is pretty standard out of the box stuff.
Excellent. And then what about, it's easy to send blast emails or whatever other, method you use, but at some point you're over farming, right? The soil gets lack of nutrients. People don't want to hear from you anymore. So is there any trick to the cycle, to the amount of times that you reach out to somebody?
I mean, it's not, this is really where analytics come in. And I think that when you say email blast, the way I perceive that, John, is really, okay, I'm sending it out to my entire database, right? That's what the one thing you got to be careful of. I'm sending it to all 50,000 people that are in my ICP, and I'm going to send the same email. That's dangerous, right? So especially in a B2B. Now B2C, that's fine. This is the difference though, right? So what I want to do in the B2B space is I go back to those targets and talk to those targets in the way that they need to be talked to, no matter what the email is. So if I have a general piece, even if I want to invite the entire database to an event or a webinar or some kind of one of those value created moments that I'm trying to work on, I still want the language to be slightly different, because people are going to know that's a mass email. We all know which ones are mass and which ones aren't. But I at least want to say, hey, I customize this a little bit, and this is something for you, right? If you start getting all these generics, you're just going to opt out, and then you're losing the leads that you've gathered and put together.
Yeah, that's good.
This is why, going back to that point, that Tracy and I were talking about, is why you want people to think strategically, because email specialists blast the database. Right? If you have segment leaders that manage each one of your targets or are responsible for them, they're going to think about the insights around those targets. That's just what they're going to think about.
Good, thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, I know like TN does a lot of personalized, text messages, which I always find to be the most impactful, which I do as well. It takes a long time, right?
Yeah.
Maybe there's no way around doing that. Maybe there is, but for sure they know you took the extra time to say something to them that only relates to them.
Yeah, you
Absolutely.
have to do, if you're doing high-end sales to CEOs, like inviting people to salon dinners, they're running $20 million, $50 million businesses, or an investor who's worth 50 to $200 million, they're not going to even look at an email. In fact, I'm lucky if they look at a text message. So yeah, so we text these guys, and yes, it takes a long time. Like to do one salon dinner takes, to get 20 people, it takes about 380 or 400 emails, plus countless text messages. So you got to keep really detailed records. I think marketing, and Craig, thank you so much. This is very informative, but it's all situational depending on who your target is. If your target's
right.
a high-end, super wealthy, super busy person, that's one style. If the person is sort of a middle market individual who's buying a pair of shoes or shirts or widgets, that's another method you would use. It really depends on the target.
Well, I think the target for every person that I see on this call that I know is these middle market companies and their leadership, right? And those people.
Yeah. So yeah, if you send an email to a business owner who's running a $20 million business and they don't know you, forget it. They'll never respond. And if they even know you, they may not respond.
Right.
And if they have any smell that it's coming out of HubSpot, you can just forget it. And I know that because that's what I do.
Yeah. 100%.
HubSpot hasn't figured out a way to text me yet. So when I get a text, it's a very good chance that it's someone I know, that it came personal. It didn't come from some automated machine. Not to mention stuff that goes into the spam filters. They're so sensitive. Even Mark Haas sent me 3 emails yesterday, all went into spam, and they came from his aeg.org email.
Yeah.
And, like the spam filters are very smart these days.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, you guys are exactly right, and we're targeting the same thing with our business as well. And the more personal you can get, the better. It doesn't mean that marketing can't take on some of those things, but that's where they need to be able to understand the business, and they can ruin relationships by doing exactly the opposite of what needs to happen. That's why we started with your ICP, right? You've really got to understand that. It's really important to dig into those things, because a lot of times the biggest reason that people think marketing doesn't work is because they just start doing social media, and then they're like, social media doesn't work and marketing doesn't work. It's because you don't do the basic piece of this, which is figuring out what you are going to do before you do it. That sounds simple, but it doesn't take place in a lot of companies. The other thing, and just to touch on what John, you and TN are saying, is the other thing I would caution you against, and I talk to a lot of business owners that do this, but don't buy email lists. Don't do it. Build your network organically, and there's ways to do it, especially with LinkedIn. But build it organically. Don't buy a list of 10,000 CEOs in the middle market for your particular industry and then just email them. It makes all of us look bad in marketing. So it's the lazy way out. You're never, ever going to short circuit the process that we just talked about. Doing your ICP, creating those value created moments, right? And doing it the right way. You're just not going to do it. And looking for those signals. Okay. Any other thoughts or questions? I feel like I talked for a long time. Then looking up, it's only like been 20 minutes, but I feel like it was a long time. So
I actually have a question. Hi, I'm one of those
Yeah.
annoying CEOs who gets a lot of things in my inbox, but also am trying to target other peers in the marketplace. Do you have recommendations on criteria for a CRM, or what I should, if we're exploring CRMs, and how do you choose them, or what are things you should think about for a CRM?
Well, in consideration, when we're picking them either for and helping our clients select them, is number one, figure out your strategy first, what you actually are going to do, who your target is. If it's B2B, you're going to do account-based marketing, whatever the case might be, whatever you want to do. The second thing is decide what your process is and how you're going to execute on it. And that's organizationally as well, as we talked about. Then you pick the technology piece, right? So now you've got a set of criteria around selecting that. There are a lot of really great CRMs out there. I tend to like the ones that are integrated, meaning that you can hire a marketing person to do the technology, right? You don't need an IT person to do technology. If you get into something like Salesforce, it requires an administrator a lot of times, and it's a bolted on product. So it can be a little hard to yield, especially for a mid-sized company, right? If you're a bigger company, you need some customized. Salesforce is a great solution. I'm not saying disparaging it at all, right? Obviously, they've done a good job. I would tell you the hot product right now is what Tien's saying. HubSpot is a very hot product right now. And the reason is because it's all integrated, right? You've got a CRM, you've got your marketing automation components, and they're all built into one platform. There's no technology that you have to work on. And a lot of times, as long as there's no transactions involved, you can build your website on it too, right? And be very easy. You're not wrestling with the technology. You're really working on your marketing program. So I would tell you, unless you really want to get into it, Salesforce is good. You can grow with HubSpot up to, I've seen very large companies on HubSpot, right? And it does get kind of pricey, but entry-level prices are not too bad. Zoho is another one, kind of up and coming. I would put in a second tier. Things like Pipedrive are also kind of up and coming as well. You probably want to think a little bit about something if you're going to do email, like Constant Contact. Sometimes that's an entry level piece. Just know that's only going to get you so far. Then you're going to have to switch at some point.
What do you know about the Microsoft integrated solution? I'm blanking on the name at the moment, but
Dynamics.
yes, that's it.
Listen, I'm not a technology expert per se. I have not seen in my 8 years a mid-sized company go after Dynamics. I think it's
just
a little
too robust.
It's a little hard to, yeah. Tracy's saying no. I've had this is the problem. I have had one client that has had Dynamics. We did not help them pick that, but their IT department picked it because they were a Microsoft shop. That's why they ended up going with it. Yeah. But even if you look at a tool like, if you go back to like let's just say a HubSpot, which I would say 95% of our clients are on, we either put them on it or they're already on it, is primarily because it's very easy and it integrates. It has a great integration platform. And so you can connect it to just about anything you want to. So if you want to use the CRM for HubSpot and you have Constant Contact, there's an integration. So, and it's an integration that doesn't take a IT specialist to do for you.
Great. Thank you.
Hopefully it helps. Yep.
So what's the role of sort of, we're working in social media, what's the role of sort of hard copy collateral?
You mean print?
Yeah,
print
that's what they call it.
Yeah. Listen, I think it's it depends on your industry, right? But I think it's becoming very niche. I think people don't want to carry around paper as much anymore or require that. I will sometimes run into clients that their salespeople want collateral because they're a little bit more old school and they want to hand shit out. Excuse me, hand stuff out. But it can depends on where you're at, what you're looking at, right? If you're at an event, it's good to have that collateral, but I think anything around direct mail, those types of things are really not in right now. And I don't, if you're emailing a company or you're mailing a company, that can be a little different. Now, there are some cases, right? So we had one of our clients was a promotional marketing company. And so we put together a really nice kind of enhanced direct mail piece with some samples of what they did. That's because it was about their business and we sent that out, right? So that's something that's a little bit different to kind of catch their eye. But I think if you're not going to have them open email, certainly you're not going to have them open any kind of mail, because that's got 3 layers to get through: mailroom, assistants, and then maybe make it to their desk.
One of the most impressive marketing pieces, I got a card inside a vellum envelope. It was a translucent envelope. It was a picture of my website. I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. And it had a QR code on it. And I thought it was interesting. I just left it there for 2 weeks. I finally picked it up. I scanned the QR code and my phone rings.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
hi. Wow. That was creepy. But boy, it was really effective.
Yeah. Yeah, it can't. I mean, you know, there's definitely some, I don't mean to be this disparaging, but it's not meant to be this at all. But when I say gimmicky types of things, because those can break through the clutter a little bit, right? So, hey, I'll give you a free pair of AirPods if you actually take a meeting with me. That sounds kind of desperate and gimmicky. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You know, it depends on what as long as you know what your acquisition costs for a meeting are. So if your acquisition costs per meeting are $200 and you'll take a meeting with the right person for $200, then maybe it's worth it, right? But you really got to knock it out of the park.
Mark, at least you didn't open it up and it's like a picture of you at various places. And
Right.
Instagram feed.
So Craig, let me ask a practical question. Like we're trying to bring on, build the AEG community. So what should we be doing marketing wise to get the word out, to build our membership with solid people like on this call, like Erica?
Yeah. Erica.
And Roger.
I think the process is the same, John, and that's connecting with and understanding the ICP and the members that you guys want to have in AEG, and then starting to have that those connections. And I think what you guys have been doing lately is good, like having more people come to the meetings and kind of experience it, and having those value-added moments that aren't necessarily about selling all the time, but they're about the experience side of it. So I think, it's good. I haven't dug into the nuts and bolts of it, but I think that's a good start, right? That's the right principle to use it. Now, what you have to do is look at the analytics around all the things and how that's paying off, and then go back and track them all to the ICPs of the members that you want to get, and which ones are converting and which ones aren't, and how they're converting, right? The last piece of this is really understanding the analytics of it all. There's the strategy, there's the activity, and then there's the analytics of it all. Now, the third piece is really the part that a lot of people and a lot of businesses don't follow up on. They're like, marketing is not working. Well, if you're not measuring it, you don't know if it is or it is not. And it really depends on which segment. So you may want to double down on some of those segments. You may want to drop off some of those segments, right? So you've got to track your analytics all the way back, because what you ultimately are trying to get to, and this is an advanced kind of concept once you start to get the engine running, is you want to know what an allowable is, right? What is my allowable acquisition cost for a member or for a customer? It's a very tricky thing, and it's a very advanced thing that a lot of companies, very big companies, actually don't get to. But if you can get to that moment and understand that allowable cost, that's when things really start to open up. And strategically, you start to do some different things based on your analytics. And as your competitors start to look at you, they're like, oh my gosh, how can they do that? Right? And I'll give you an example. So in insurance, right, back in the 90s, 2000, Geico came forward, right? And they're like, 15% save, give us 15 minutes, we'll save you 15% type of thing, right? And we're like, and they're undercutting everybody's rates and they're gaining market share. They're like, how in the hell are they doing it? Well, they understood analytically, number one, they didn't have agents. So they threw all of that commission money into marketing, into advertising, right? Targeting certain segments that they wanted to come in and do quotes. So it disrupted the industry because they had more advanced analytics than any of their competitors had. So it absolutely can pay off. That makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
It's one of the lost arts of marketing, honestly, is the inability to measure and keep track of everything. Because you really shouldn't do it if you're not going to measure it. You shouldn't do it, in my opinion.
And Craig, what about customer satisfaction, customer feedback, like using that in the loop? That would seem like best practice, right? To find out what they think, what they like, what they don't like, what motivates them, right? Do you believe in that in the feedback loop, and sort of how do you measure that?
Yeah, definitely. And you want to do it scientifically. Utilize some system, NPS, Net Promoter Score, some type of system to be able to measure those pieces. In particular, this is a whole nother discussion around customer onboarding. And once you get to that kind of, we talked about just that acquisition moment. Now there's that onboarding moment, especially in B2B. Like, how did it go? Your first whatever time period that you see, right? And this again goes back to the analytics of it all. So if you're acquiring a customer and you see that you have a certain percentage of people that drop off after 30 days, or when's the sticking point, right? When do we know if I'm going to have somebody for 90 days? Then that 90 days is really where I want to focus on making sure my retention comes into play, right? Because then the rest of the machine kind of kicks in. So you got to know when that time frame is around that onboarding, if it's 30, 60, 90 days, 2 weeks, whatever it might be. That's when you want to measure those satisfaction components and look for those moments, right, that are important to you, that might cause defection in that onboarding process. That's where you want to focus your NPS questioning around, right, to make sure things are happening. Especially and it can be something as formal as that. It can be something as informal as just a phone call, right? How's it going?
Craig,
Did
question.
Sam do what she was supposed to? Yes.
So
Okay.
for some of us who, represent a company, for example, me, I sell businesses and I represent a large business brokerage. Can you talk a little bit about branding yourself versus branding, that organization? Because I think I find it tough for me sometimes when I'm sponsoring an event. Those dollars are coming from me and my efforts. And, though I love who I represent, I still want to make sure that, me as a business broker, every business broker doesn't do the work like me, right? So I don't want to endorse every single business broker or M&A advisor. Can you talk through just branding yourself outside of the brand that you represent and, some pros and cons on how to do that and remain like in a great light both ways?
Yeah, for sure. No, it's a really good question. And we in our business, we have the same type of thing, right? So am I branding myself or am I branding the firm? And how do you work that dynamic? I think here's the way that I think about it, and I think that everyone should think about it, right? So when you think about the firm, that's what's going to get you in the door, right? The fact that a firm of X caliber said that you're good, that gives you a certain amount of cachet, right? So you're going to say, okay, great. Let me leverage that value in that equation. Now they're going to buy from you. They're buying when it really comes down to it, when you're building that type of relationship, they're going to buy from you, Erica. They're not buying from the firm. So if you go to a different firm, they're still going to buy from you, but you should leverage that enough to get them in the door. Say, this is me, start that introduction, and then start to build your personal brand inside of that, right?
Thank you, Craig.
I didn't know you were so self-centered, Erica.
Well, John, everyone doesn't do the work like me, right? And sometimes
Right.
putting a stamp on someone that, may not take a call on a Sunday or may not be up with, Tien and I at 4:30 telling you to get up at 5 a.m. Not everybody does it that way. So, I think there's a lot of cachet and pristine with, who I represent. I think they're awesome. But again, I think I do some of the best work you know, in the DMV. So I like to make sure that I highlight my work versus everybody else's, because I just don't know how good they're all going to work. So
That's where you have to know where that ends, right? And where the firm's value ends and your value begins.
Right.
So I think I mean, looking at you, Erica, and hearing you talk about this, I think you know where that is. And so once you start to get into that and they're like, okay, we like Erica, she's the one we're going to buy from. Then at that point, you leverage the firm as much as that's the resources that they're going to provide to you. And you've got the backing of this firm versus just being an independent, right? Which brings now you've got a whole nother set of questions that you've got to answer. Stability, financial backing, all those types of things, that all goes away, right? Now you can really focus on your personal brand.
great.
I think the firm would want you to do the same thing, by the way. I don't think that it's anything that, if the firm is smart, that's what they want to do. That's why they're hiring you that way, right?
Yeah. Our president is used to being the star of the show, and now he's, you know, taking a seat back a little bit and is enjoying everybody else kind of go out there and build his franchise. So he's excited about it.
Yeah. Well, in doing so and having someone like your caliber, that adds to the additional value of the firm, right? So it is all very cyclical, but I think you have to know where everything sits in the value equation for sure.
Thank you.
Hey, Roger. How does North Harbor, does any of this resonate with you and your business? You're muted.
For good reason. I was just thinking about the data analytics side and creating these dashboards, and that's something that one of the companies that we have been focused on in the aviation space, that business tracks traffic aircraft traffic coming in and out of airports. And these are companies, individuals, and the whole strategy is to attract traffic to your airport. And so we've spent a good amount of time looking at the data analytics piece and figuring out what sort of dashboard we need to create. And that's going to be different for every industry and every business, but it's super powerful. And we always say that the data analytics piece is really the only edge that we can bring to market. There are other advantages, but it's very powerful. So that's something that I would want to dig into.
Roger, when you think about analytics, think about it this way, because it can be very overwhelming. And I think this is where a lot of people get like paralysis with like so much data coming at you. Yeah. So what you typically should try to narrow yourself down to 4 to 5 key performance indicators, KPIs, that really measure the business. Right. And then from there, if you find that they're outside of the threshold that you've determined is appropriate, then ask the questions and go deeper into the analytics piece of that, right? That's really the key piece, because a lot of times when I step into a client, they'll have a dashboard and it says, here's how many emails were opened and here's how many social media likes we have. That doesn't matter, really. Yeah. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter, because you can push one button and another button, and I can make those go up and down and nothing will happen to revenue. So you got to think about the 4 to 5 KPIs that are really going to move the revenue needle. And those are the ones that you really want to track within a certain threshold. And then you start to dig in. Then you ask questions of that particular KPI and then pull it back. Right.
So, Craig, what are your 4 or 5 KPIs you're tracking?
So we track people on our network, right? How we're actually building out our particular network. So how many prospects or leads do we have in our database? How many good conversations we're having on a weekly basis. So each one of our advisors, we target 4 to 5 good conversations. Doesn't matter if they're qualified or not, just have 3 to 4 good conversations, right? Obviously it's revenue. And then it's proposals. So we think about those 4 to 5 things. And what that does is that gives you, I have leading indicators, which are how am I growing the database and what they look like. I don't count how many emails, right? Because the next piece is how many conversations are you having? So whatever we're doing in the middle between those two, I really want it to result in a conversation, right? Good, bad, and different, whatever that might happen. And then those are kind of your leading piece. And then you want your kind of leaning and lagging components that tell me what happened after the fact. The lagging one is the revenue component, right? The leaning one is those conversations and the proposals that we have in the pipeline.
Would referrals be one of them?
Yeah, but I would put that in the middle activity component, right? I definitely want more referrals, but that's kind of a drill down piece. Like, how are we, if I was to drill down in that space and I would say, okay, referrals, email, social media, webinars, events, I want to put those all in one bucket. And then I want to pull that out and say which ones are performing the best. Now, referrals are going to perform the best, I can tell you. But so then you're saying, okay, how do we maximize referrals? How much, what is our strategy around that? What's that's going to force you to do is think more about referrals and the things that actually work and think less about the things that don't work or aren't working at a particular time, right?
I mean, definitely in our space with the CEOs, the people they value most are their peers.
Yeah.
Right? And so if their peers refer you, you know, that's as golden
100%.
as you get.
Yeah, 100%. And I think when you start to have those conversations, right, inside of that conversation that you're having, we have a playbook that we go by, what happens in that conversation, right? So I need all of our advisors to execute on that conversation. One of those is exactly what we just talked about today, which is I want you to identify their pain point. If you can't identify their pain point, then they may not be in the buying cycle right now. But if you identify some type of pain point, we have 4 areas that we look at. I want you to look at that pain point. I want you to keep your thumb on that pain point and not let it up. Now, the pain can be real or it cannot be real. Sometimes my toe hurts and sometimes my back hurts, right? And that may not actually be the thing that's causing the problem. But it's their perception of that problem, so you better go with it, right? Because if you don't, if you say that's not really your problem, this is your problem, you're not going to have another conversation. Not with the CEO.
That's good. That's really good.
Yeah. But you each one of those moments, right? Those KPIs, you got to figure out. Okay, we had 50 good conversations this last month. How many of those things turned into proposals, and why didn't they, or why did they? And then you double down on that. And that's the question you're asking off of that KPI, right? Now you've got that KPI. Now I'm asking those questions. Okay, how many people followed the process that we put into place? Okay, half. Of those half that did, how many converted? Okay, most of them did. Okay, so people aren't following the process. That's where we need to focus, right? We're getting good conversations. So those are the types of things when you start to drill into it, those are the things that as a leadership team, they all need to be thinking about, not looking at a spreadsheet around email open rates and clicks, right? And how many people came to the website or where we rank on Google. No one cares. Right? I mean, I can tell you, I walk into so many situations where they think their pain point is that when they type into Google, their industry or whatever it is, they don't show up and they are pissed off about it. I'm like, okay, well, let's fix that then. Right? That's where you have to start the conversation because that's where they're at. Okay, well, now I got to move them off of that. I got to move them off to where they're really what the problem is.
And it certainly doesn't hurt to show up. That's for sure.
Yes.
So it's not like you're doing any harm. It's
100%.
Just a question.
Well, that goes back to a marketing problem where the marketing team is not being strategic in showing their CEO the right things, right? They're not focused on the whole value chain and creating a marketing strategy around this. They're really into executing activities, which is the death of marketing, to be honest with you. You just start to get in that space.
Yeah, most of these people, they're not like I do financial planning, wealth management, exit planning. They're not going to Google and searching that. They're calling their buddy and going like, who do you use? Right. And their buddy,
right. Exactly.
This gal. That's what they're doing. So you know, it just depends on what the industry. If it's more commodity, then maybe they're doing that. But if it's like pretty advanced, you know, advice and service that you're providing, I think it's a different
Yes,
animal that we're all chasing here.
100%.
I
Yeah,
think they
absolutely
look
agree
at
with you.
those things sort of after the fact, right? They look you up on LinkedIn before they meet you. They look at your website, but they're not getting you from that. They're using that as due diligence.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. And I think that you bring up a good point, John, and that's really the place that you really have to focus is on your LinkedIn profile and your website. And you hit the nail right on the head. They should be right in there. You should be changing your LinkedIn profile at least every quarter,
Huh.
right?
Well, Craig, I just want to mention something here because John spoke about, memberships in AEG and increasing, just the members here. And I feel that, John, you do a really good job of giving us FOMO, right? Or fear of missing out. You put up a really nice post like, hey, this was a great night, and you're tagging Tien and Mark, and everyone looked like they had such a fun time. And if you're not there, you feel like you've missed the most grand event. And I think that really promotes I need to be a part of this association because I don't want to miss out on something, fun or some great advice or some expertise. So I just want to give you kudos that anytime I'm not there, I'm always like, man, I should have been there. So great job. You're doing it well.
Almost like
100%. And it's the best networking in DC that you can do, right? So I agree with Erica the same. Absolutely. And you can tell you guys are making adjustments, and that's what you have to do in your marketing program and in your programs overall is making these slight adjustments and adjusting it here and there and not making it stale, and people start to see that, and that's how you ultimately affect that satisfaction component in just about every business, right? So it does look from the outside that you're kind of like inside outside people, but yeah, you guys are doing the right things.